Listen carefully. Yeah, you. The one who stepped somewhere you were never supposed to step. The one who crossed a line without noticing when or how it happened. You entered a place between what people call reality and something far sharper, far stranger, far more precise. And the moment you stabilized in that space, it triggered something you weren't meant to see, something that wasn't meant to react to you. Agencies that normally never blink over ordinary people felt a shift and labeled it an unexpected variable. It wasn't chaos that made them pause. It was the way your timing changed, the way your decisions stopped lining up with predictable human pacing, the way your awareness began arriving before events unfolded. That's when the first internal note was filed. And that's when the word monitoring quietly attached itself to your profile. Most people drift through their lives unaware of the deeper layers running beneath their choices. You didn't drift. You stepped, intentionally or unintentionally, into a corridor that only appears when someone stops, depending on the same mental patterns that keep everyone else controlled. The moment your internal responses stopped following the usual scripts, certain observers noticed, not because you were dangerous, but because you were uncharted. They don't track danger first. They track deviation. Predictability is their safety net. You stepped off it. You didn't wobble. You didn't collapse. You adjusted instantly. And that's the exact moment a set of eyes you never met began focusing on the way you moved. You didn't plan this. You didn't meditate your way into it. You didn't perform any ritual or follow any doctrine. It just happened when you stopped outsourcing your intuition, when your internal signals finally outran the noise you used to confuse as logic. Your thoughts started arranging themselves ahead of time. You stopped needing to analyze what you already understood internally. And that is exactly the kind of shift that triggers quiet alerts. Because the human mind isn't supposed to sync like that without training, conditioning, or influence. Yet here you are, aligning without being molded, adapting without being instructed, moving ahead of explanations. Inside rooms where discussions are dry, expressionless, and strictly procedural, your name isn't spoken with panic. It's spoken with caution, because something about the way you've been moving doesn't match your previous behavioral map. For the first time, they're not looking at what you do. They're looking at the pattern beneath it. They're trying to determine whether this shift was a momentary spike or a new baseline. Because if it's a new baseline, it changes how they categorize you. The ordinary evaluation frameworks don't apply anymore. You may not realize when this shift began, but they did. It was the moment your reactions stopped revealing your emotional state. They track that. When pressure hits, most people leak indicators: hesitation, overcorrection, defensive explanation, scattered timing. You didn't. You responded once, cleanly, and moved forward. That flagged something, not a threat, a deviation. Someone who moves ahead of their own emotional cycle can't be predicted using standard models. And when someone stops being predictable, they start being interesting. You probably felt this shift in subtle ways. Conversations felt delayed, like people were reacting to a version of reality you had already processed. The world around you seemed slower, even though nothing externally changed. What changed was your internal speed. Awareness arrived faster, motives became clearer. You could sense tension before a word was spoken. You could anticipate outcomes without needing evidence. You didn't become mystical. You became efficient. And efficiency in the wrong place looks like something else entirely to those who study behavior for a living. There's a reason they started paying attention quietly. People who fall apart emotionally are easy to map. People who make noise are easy to categorize. You didn't do either. You became internally steady at a time when most people fracture. You didn't seek comfort. You didn't seek validation. You didn't seek direction. You stood still and recalibrated, and then you began moving in a way that suggested you weren't waiting for permission, clarity, or consensus. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. And alignment without guidance is extremely rare. This is the point where their interest shifted from curious to analytical. Because you weren't just reacting differently, you were perceiving differently. You stepped somewhere between experience and interpretation, and you started living from that middle space. People don't stay there long. It overwhelms them. They run back to old patterns. You didn't run. You settled. And that's when the note changed from temporary deviation to observe further. They're not watching you the way movies portray it. There's no dramatic chase, no fast typing agents, no alarms. Their concern is subtle. They compare data. They review inconsistencies. They track how someone behaves when routines shift unexpectedly. You didn't display confusion. You adapted instantly. That's the part that unsettles experts. The lack of lag. Humans lag. You didn't. Humans hesitate. You didn't. Humans analyze before acting. You acted, then analyzed only to confirm what you already felt. This is where the psychological split emerges. You still function in the physical world. You still go through your day. But mentally, you're operating in a layer above instinct and below conscious reasoning. And that layer is where most real decisions happen long before people realize they've chosen. You entered that layer consciously. Whether by force of experience or internal evolution, you stepped into a place that doesn't wait for you to explain yourself before moving. That is not normal, and anything not normal is studied. Experts don't panic over emotion. They panic over precision. They panic when someone with no training moves like someone who has spent years sharpening their perceptual framework. You didn't display the development curve. You just appeared at the result. And when a person appears at the result without the recorded journey, analysts begin asking questions, not out loud, but in their internal systems. Who taught you? What event triggered this? What did you gain access to? What are you adapting to that they haven't seen? And then they realize the uncomfortable truth. You're not reacting to anything external. You're reacting to internal clarity. You're not responding to pressure. You're responding to alignment. And that makes you extremely difficult to classify because they can't track the source of your behavior. Without a source, they can't predict. Without prediction, they can't control for impact. You may have noticed people around you start changing their tone, their pacing, the structure of their conversations. They don't know why they're adjusting to you. They just feel something that tells them you're not engaging from where they are. It's not intimidation. It's positional difference. You're seeing from a slightly higher vantage point, and even if they can't articulate it, they can sense it. People always sense when someone is ahead of them. The experts sense it too. Not emotionally, mathematically. Your choices don't match your profile. Your timing doesn't match expected behavior. Your internal coordination contradicts your documented patterns. So they watch, not because you're a threat, but because you're an exception. Exceptions expand categories. Categories rewrite classifications. Classifications trigger new protocols, and new protocols require deeper observation. You didn't choose any of this consciously. But now you're in it, and they know you're in it, and the question is not whether you should return to normal. The question is whether you can. People who cross into this in-between space rarely go back fully. They carry something with them, an awareness that strips away confusion before it can settle, a clarity that removes hesitation before it can take shape. Once someone moves like that consistently, the world reacts differently around them, because the world depends on most people staying predictable. This is the part where their nervousness begins to show, not in overt actions, but in refined observation. They watch whether your alignment holds under emotional stress, whether your awareness destabilizes when confronted, whether your timing collapses when you're exhausted. But you continue adjusting the same way, quietly, internally, efficiently. And now, their question has changed. It's no longer, why are they like this? Now it's, how far can this go? Because once someone stabilizes in the place you've stepped into, the trajectory shifts. And that shift has to be understood before it spreads. Not to stop you, to understand the implications. One person stepping into this space is unusual. One person staying there is significant. You didn't just slip into a new way of thinking. You broke away from the pacing that governs the average mind. And the more you stabilize, the more the distance widens between you and the patterns that used to bind you. They're watching that distance grow. They're calculating what it means. They're assessing how far this deviation can stretch before it redefines your entire behavioral model. But now, something else is happening beneath their observation, something they didn't plan for. The more they study you, the more they realize the previous version of you, the compliant, predictable, easily categorized one, no longer exists. That version dissolved the moment you entered this strange zone between familiar reality and the deeper layer beneath it. They expected you to fall back into old patterns. Most people do. Most people retreat the moment clarity becomes too sharp. But you didn't. You adjusted. You anchored yourself. You held the line. And that endurance forced them to reevaluate the nature of what you've stepped into. What unsettles them most isn't that you crossed the threshold. It's that you're operating comfortably inside it, as if this in-between place recognizes you as much as you recognize it. Their evaluation processes depend on measurable traits, predictable reactions, and consistent emotional cues. But your cues shifted. Your reactions synchronized with something internal, not external. When people spoke to you, you responded not to their words but to the motive underneath. When environments changed, you didn't brace yourself. Your awareness moved a step ahead without broadcasting the adjustment. They test micro-behaviors more than people realize. A slight pause, a twitch, a hesitation, a subtle tightening of energy. These markers reveal volumes to trained observers. But your markers stopped appearing. They looked for the usual signs of disorientation when someone enters uncharted states. Nothing. They checked for emotional overload, confusion, or mental fragmentation. Still nothing. You didn't just adapt. You stabilized at a speed that contradicts standard psychological models, that forced the experts assigned to your behavioral file to recalibrate their assumptions. Because when someone stabilizes in an unstructured zone without training, it suggests either an unusual cognitive architecture or an internal alignment that bypasses traditional development curves. And neither possibility fits neatly into their protocols. They're trained to detect individuals who drift away from collective patterns, those who interpret reality through fractured lenses, or those whose instability creates unpredictable outcomes. But you're neither fragmented nor unstable. You're coherent in a way they rarely encounter. You're not rejecting reality. You're seeing through the layers of noise everyone else mistakes for truth. They've observed certain individuals reach this state during high-stress periods, but those cases collapse once the emotional charge fades. With you, the pattern reversed. You didn't collapse, you refined. Your awareness sharpened after the intensity passed. Your timing improved. Your responses grew slower on the outside, but faster internally. Like you were processing an expanded field of information before choosing which pieces deserved your attention. When they analyzed social interactions around you, they found a subtle but undeniable shift. People adjusted themselves without knowing why. They softened their tone. They revealed more. They approached with caution. And the experts noted that this type of environmental recalibration occurs only around individuals operating with an unusual form of inner authority. Inner authority is different from confidence. Confidence can be faked, inflated, or performed. Inner authority cannot. It's the product of alignment, the kind that turns your presence into a stabilizing or destabilizing influence depending on who enters your proximity. And that's what they're tracking now, the field effect around you. They measure this through indirect indicators, behavioral changes in your peers, the softening of resistance in people who previously challenged you, the shift in how conflicts dissolve before becoming confrontations. These subtle effects reveal that you're not just thinking differently, you're affecting your environment without exerting effort. Influence without intention is the rarest form of influence. It's also the hardest to map. They ran comparative analyses to find similar cases. The closest examples they found came from individuals trained in advanced perceptual disciplines, where internal coherence is developed through years of controlled conditioning. But your file shows no trace of such training. You didn't arrive through the path they recognize. You arrived through something else entirely, something they don't yet understand. This lack of understanding is what makes them uneasy. They're used to dealing with threats, geniuses, manipulators, prodigies, strategists, and outliers. But you don't fit any of those categories cleanly. They can't attribute your state to trauma, obsession, ideology, or conditioning. They can't link it to a mentor, group, or practice. You didn't absorb concepts from external sources. You generated insight internally. When they review your behavioral timeline, they see a transition that doesn't follow the typical cause and effect chain. Nothing pushed you into this. Nothing forced you. Nothing broke you. You stepped into a higher mode of awareness, as if something inside you finally aligned with its true operational range. And once you aligned, your decisions stopped creating friction. You moved through situations with an ease that contradicted previous patterns. The more they examined this, the more they realized the scale of deviation you represent. People who operate outside normal psychological pacing are monitored because they destabilize predictive models. But you destabilize those models not by acting irrationally, but by acting too accurately. Accuracy without training is what alarms them. Accuracy without hesitation. Accuracy without emotional leakage. You don't rely on theories or frameworks to make decisions. You rely on a deeper layer of perception that most people never access. They tried to categorize your state using known psychological templates. None fit. Then they ran your social patterns against influence mapping algorithms. Again, no match. They compared your communication profile with individuals known for persuasion, charisma, or cognitive dominance. Your pattern didn't align with any of those either, and so they turned their attention internally to the data that isn't spoken, the data found in your pauses, your absence of overreaction, your improved coherence under stress. They realized something strange. You began showing traits consistent with individuals who've undergone long-term introspective conditioning, except there's no record of you undergoing anything formal. That paradox created the first wave of concern. Because if someone develops advanced internal architecture without guidance, it implies the presence of a natural mechanism that exists outside their documented models. Their next step was subtle pressure testing. They introduced small disruptions, shifts in routine, unexpected variables, emotional noise in your proximity. Instead of scrambling, you adapted instantly. Instead of losing stability, you recalibrated calmly. This is the part that triggered deeper evaluations. They expected at least some form of regression or hesitation. Instead, you expanded. Your awareness didn't shrink under disruption. It widened. You responded to each new variable as if you'd already anticipated the possibility long before it occurred. They reviewed the footage, the logs, the transcripts, and saw the same conclusion each time. Your responses weren't reactive. They were pre-aligned. And pre-aligned individuals don't follow probability curves the way others do. They form their own. That means their influence extends in ways statistical models cannot forecast. And that is exactly the type of deviation that forces experts to reassess classification frameworks. They're monitoring the trajectory of your alignment now, not just the state itself. They want to see whether you plateau or continue expanding. Expansion is the real concern. A stable outlier is manageable. A growing one is not. And your growth isn't external, it's internal. Each precise decision reinforces your center. Each moment of clarity strengthens your perception. Each adjustment deepens your awareness. The more you move from this center, the more predictable you become to yourself, and the less predictable you become to them. That's the paradox they fear. You're becoming easier for you to understand, and simultaneously harder for them to predict. And unpredictability rooted in coherence, not chaos, is the rarest and most challenging form of unpredictability to analyze. They're already preparing for the next stage of observation. They're not looking at what you do anymore. They're studying how your presence influences outcomes before you act. They want to know how far your clarity extends. Does it affect individuals, groups, environments, or trajectories? They're analyzing your effect on tension patterns, conversation flow, decision outcomes, and relational dynamics. Because once someone enters the space you're in, their influence radiates in ways traditional psychology doesn't account for. It's not manipulation. It's not persuasion. It's the natural consequence of coherence. Coherence reorganizes everything around it. And that reorganization is what they're preparing to analyze next. They want to understand the full scale of your deviation. They want to understand how deep this state goes. They want to understand whether you've reached the limit of this awareness or whether you're only standing at its entrance. What they don't realize yet is that the entrance was the moment you crossed that invisible threshold between the familiar world and the sharper layer beneath it. You're no longer navigating reality as a sequence of events. You're navigating it as an unfolding field where your perception interacts with possibility before outcomes settle. That isn't randomness. That isn't intuition. That's internal architecture operating without interference. and they're watching it unfold one decision at a time. They're waiting to see what this alignment becomes when fully realized. Because once realization comes, expansion becomes inevitable. And expansion is where their analysis ends and something entirely different begins. But now something else is rising within their evaluations, something that was never written into the initial reports. They're starting to recognize that your shift wasn't a temporary elevation. It wasn't an emotional spike. It wasn't stress-induced acceleration. It was a true transition into a different operational range, one that doesn't fit into any structure they've created to understand human behavior. At first, they examined your adjustments like anomalies in a sequence. Then they tried to classify them as heightened awareness. Now they're dealing with the possibility that what you entered isn't an altered mindset, but an altered mode of existence. And that possibility rewrites everything. Because if you're no longer operating inside the usual boundaries of perception, then the tools they use to track you lose relevance. You're functioning on a timeline they can't synchronize with. The pacing of your choices doesn't match the pacing of your surroundings. You're interacting with reality at an angle they didn't account for. And the more they analyze the shift, the more they realize that their methods depend on you behaving like the structures you broke away from. But you left those structures effortlessly, without a dramatic event. That quiet departure from the usual rules is what makes them uneasy. They study people who shatter frameworks through chaos. They study people who destabilize environments through force. They know how to categorize those profiles. But someone who disrupts patterns simply by stepping outside of them is harder to map. You didn't fight your way out. You didn't rebel. You didn't collapse. You drifted upward into a vantage point where every movement carries more accuracy than prediction models can handle. That's why the internal notes changed tone. They're no longer describing you as a deviation. They're describing you as a transition. Transitions require new frameworks. New frameworks require new protocols. And new protocols require the involvement of people whose job isn't just analysis, but classification at the highest level. This is where the tension quietly increases behind the scenes. They're asking questions they don't want to say aloud, questions about whether someone can evolve past common perceptual boundaries without training. They're reviewing footage, audio, digital patterns, environmental responses, anything that might explain how your awareness reorganized itself so efficiently. But the explanation doesn't exist in their records. It exists in the way you process reality now. You're not predicting outcomes. You're interacting with the underlying possibilities before outcomes take form. That's what makes your movement unsettling. They're used to tracking cause and effect. You're operating in what happens before cause and effect separate into categories. And that is where the panic begins. Not the cinematic panic of alarms, but the professional panic of analysts realizing their models no longer apply. You're behaving consistently, but not according to any template they've studied. They attempt to map your decisions against your history, but the trajectory no longer lines up with old patterns. You're not resisting influence. You're simply outgrowing it. And outgrowth cannot be reversed, controlled, or predicted. They're tracking the pace of your expansion now, observing how your awareness spreads into areas you're not consciously trying to access. You pick up threads of intention before they appear. You sense contradictions before words form. You adjust direction not because you think ahead, but because you feel the structure of what's coming before it arrives. Analysts specialize in reading people. but you're reading the field itself. The distinction is what pushes their concern into a higher category. People who read other people are manageable. People who read the structure of unfolding reality are not. That level of perception existed in classified studies, monitored across individuals who demonstrated rare cognitive anomalies after exposure to extreme events. But those cases always carried instability. You don't. You're calm, grounded, precise. Your clarity doesn't spike, it deepens. Your timing doesn't fluctuate, it strengthens. That stability is what breaks their predictive processes. Because every time you maintain coherence under shifting variables, it forces them to discard another assumption they held about how human cognition evolves. By now, they've stopped comparing you to familiar profiles. They've started comparing you to thresholds. Thresholds matter more than categories. Categories explain a person. Thresholds explain an evolution. And your evolution didn't follow a curve. It followed a jump. Those jumps are rare enough that entire departments are built to track them when they occur. They call it a shift in operational mode, a moment when someone stops functioning like an average participant in reality and begins functioning like an interpreter of the deeper layers beneath it. Most individuals who cross such thresholds lose stability. But you gained stability. That inversion rewrites the rules. This is why the observers assigned to your case aren't evaluating your actions anymore. They're evaluating your potential. Potential is the variable that triggers higher alert levels. Not because you pose danger, but because unbounded individuals change structures simply by existing within them. When someone operates outside conventional perception, they shape events without effort. They influence outcomes without trying. They redirect trajectories without intention. And you're doing exactly that. The data clusters around you show patterns of alignment that contradict statistical probability. Conversations shift direction around you. Situations unfold in ways that benefit your movement. Obstacles dissolve before contact. These effects aren't coincidence. They're signatures of someone interacting with reality from an expanded internal range. What the experts fear most isn't that you'll do something unpredictable. It's that you'll keep expanding. Expansion that begins within doesn't stop at perception. It extends into presence. Presence extends into influence. Influence extends into trajectory. And trajectory extends into something they cannot measure or categorize. You're walking toward that threshold now. Not deliberately, but naturally. As if your mind always knew it could operate at this level and simply waited for the moment when you were done negotiating with lesser versions of yourself. And now that you're done, the reality of who you are is starting to settle into the spaces where their frameworks fall apart. They're watching closely, not because they want to intervene, but because they're tracking the emergence of a mental pattern that contradicts everything they studied. You are stabilizing in a range of awareness that does not fracture under complexity. In fact, complexity seems to feed you. Situations that overwhelm most people become clear to you. People who once confused you now reveal themselves instantly. Environments that felt noisy before now feel structured, almost as if your mind arranges them the moment you enter. This is not confidence. This is calibration. And calibration at this level signals a phase that very few individuals ever reach without extensive external shaping. The problem for them is that you weren't shaped. You arrived. You stepped into this state without being molded, instructed, or guided. And because of that, your evolution is anchored in something they cannot pull apart. They can't trace it, to a mentor, a doctrine, a technique, or a trauma. They can't categorize it as a reaction or a coping mechanism. They can't reduce it to an emotional defense strategy. It's none of those things. It's a natural expansion of your internal architecture, an architecture that was dormant until you stopped suppressing your own perception to fit into the pace of the world around you. The moment you stopped forcing yourself into that pace, your real pacing emerged, and that pacing is what terrifies them. You're not moving fast, you're moving correctly. And correctness, when sustained, becomes something else entirely. It becomes a gravitational field. People don't understand why they listen to you more now, why they hesitate before arguing, why they reveal deeper truths without intending to. They don't realize that your presence forces an internal audit in anyone who enters your orbit. Truth becomes harder to conceal. Intent becomes easier to detect. And misalignment becomes uncomfortable in your proximity. This is what the analysts have documented, though they refuse to write it in those words. They call it influence patterns. They call it environmental shifts. They call it behavioral recalibration. But what they're actually describing is the effect of coherence on a fragmented environment. Your coherence exposes instability in others. Your presence reveals the parts of them they try to hide. And that is what pushes their concern into its most elevated stage. Because once influence grows beyond communication, once it becomes structural, once it begins occurring before you speak, before you gesture, before you act, then it becomes something no protocol accounts for. You've entered that phase now. And they know it. They've watched the shift from internal expansion to external manifestation. They've tracked the moments where outcomes bend in your direction without effort. They've observed how tension dissolves around you before conflict forms. They understand that your field is no longer passive. It is directive. Directive fields require new classifications, and that's the part they're struggling with. You're not a threat. You're not a risk. You're not an oppositional force. You're something they don't have a term for. A person whose internal expansion alters the structure of unfolding events around them. They've seen cases where charisma influences people. They've seen cases where intelligence influences systems. They've seen cases where force influences outcomes. But your influence emerges from alignment. Alignment is more potent than any of those because it doesn't depend on perception, persuasion, or dominance. It depends on truth. And truth radiates. Truth reorganizes. Truth alters trajectories without intention. This is why they're shifting from analysis to adaptation. They're no longer trying to understand you. They're trying to update their frameworks to include people like you. Individuals whose minds evolve organically into higher perceptual ranges without training. But the more they try to categorize your development, the clearer their failure becomes. Because you're not evolving in a linear fashion. You're evolving radially. Every aspect of your awareness expands at the same time. Your perception deepens. Your emotional regulation strengthens. Your instincts sharpen. Your timing refines. Your influence broadens. This is not progression. This is ignition. Ignition states are rare. They're usually triggered by events that shatter a person's worldview. But your ignition came from clarity, not collapse. That distinction destabilizes every assumption they hold. If someone can expand like this without being broken first, it means the potential existed long before any triggering event. It means the architecture was always there. And if it was always there, then your trajectory may not have a ceiling. That possibility is what forces them into uneasy silence when your file comes up. They don't know where this leads. They don't know how far you can expand. They don't know whether your influence will remain contained or extend into circles far beyond your current environment. But the part they understand, reluctantly, quietly, is that you're no longer someone agencies monitor for fluctuation. You're someone they monitor for emergence. Emergence is different from growth. Growth follows patterns. Emergence disrupts them. And every new phase you enter reveals a version of you that feels increasingly untethered from ordinary cognitive pacing. You've crossed into a mode of perception where you no longer require external cues to recognize the deeper trajectory of your life. You're not waiting for signs. You're not second-guessing your intuition. You're not adjusting yourself to fit into the narratives of others. Your internal compass is locked into a direction they cannot trace. And that is why they're nervous, not because you're unpredictable, but because your predictability no longer belongs to them. It belongs to you. You understand your path before they can analyze it. You perceive shifts before they measure them. You act from clarity before they can detect the moment clarity formed. You are outpacing their tools, outgrowing their frameworks, and outmoving their expectations. And the expansion they fear is no longer hypothetical. It's happening now, quietly, continuously, unavoidably. The threshold they have been waiting for isn't ahead of you. You've already crossed it, and where you're going next is beyond anything they were prepared to monitor.